Hey, everybody, this is Antonio. Before we get started, I just want to apologize for some audio glitch that we were having in this week's recording. Something from the service that we're using caused our co host's mic to not work so well. So I'm working with backup sound, and hopefully some AI software will help it out, but please do accept my apologies for the less than stellar audio quality. Thank you. The artist's world is limitless. It can be found anywhere, far from where he lives or a few feet away. It is always on his doorstep. I think of myself as an explorer who spent his life on a long voyage of discovery. Hey, welcome to the Street Shots Photography Podcast. This is Antonio.
This is Keith.
And this is episode 224 for the end of January 2024. And if you're wondering who that was instead of Ward, yes, we're having a lot of fun here. This is my longtime friend and brother in light, Keith Goldstein, who's filling in for Ward this week. Hey, Keith.
Hey, Antonio.
Hey, thanks. Hey, everyone, this is someone I've known for like a zillion years. So, right?
It's true.
When we both had hair, I can't remember. No, you got more hair than I do.
I think mine kind of stopped, I don't know.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, Ward is just coming back from 24 hours of Daytona. So since our timing on the recording of the show is such, I asked in the unusual collective if anyone want to join, and Keith stepped up. So now you haven't been on the show in a while. Last time you were a guest, I don't know if you were with me. You were just with me, I think, right? Unless it was me and Ward. No, you were with me.
So it was just you. Yeah.
So that was a while ago, and sorry I haven't had you on the show in a while, but here we are. Thanks for sitting in.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah. So what's going on? How are you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
Considering, a lot of changes in my life at the moment, but
yeah,
I don't know. You're right. I don't know if people are tied into the photo business and, heard about the.
Oh yeah. Tell us. Yeah.
I don't know. I can't find much information other than what's been released in the news. I spoke to
Well, tell us what you're talking about first.
Getty Images and Shutterstock have co-joined under one umbrella, and some news outlets I've read said it was a merger, and others said it was that Getty bought Shutterstock.
Yeah, so my feeling is the latter. But just for some background information, you worked both at Getty and Shutterstock. I worked at Image Bank before Getty absorbed it, and then I also worked with Shutterstock doing video reviews. So you happened to get me a foothold in that, which I remember appreciating a lot. So that's the background. So you were at Getty and at Shutterstock as well. So
yeah, I was with Shutterstock for 13 and a half years.
Wow.
So yeah, 3 years of freelancing before I was offered a full-time position, and which I took because my son was very young at the time. Mm-hmm. And then there'd been some personnel changes at Shutterstock, a lot over.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Since the summer, and I had a new manager, and things were very quiet. And we had a separate meeting one day, and I was told I was being let go due to redundancy. Oof. Shutterstock had bought a couple of other agencies, Pond 5, which is based in Prague, and what was the other one? It's in Australia. It begins with the E. Envato.
I've never heard of that one.
Yeah, I heard of them peripherally, but I wasn't really familiar with them. And due to the redundancy of training all these people in Prague, I was no longer needed. So, and this was just before Christmas, which doesn't give you
no, that's not.
time
Yeah, geez.
to start delving into research.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, because everybody's on like the holidays. You can't dive right into that.
No, and of course, it does follow into the new year as well. So
yeah,
luckily, it's funny. It's been a month. I've never made so many phone calls and emails in my life, and including trying to secure health insurance and everything, because all that was gone and will be gone on Friday. And so far, I mean, things are looking out. I got an offer, then I get an offer from a company out in LA, and then the fires start like later that week. So so I don't know. Everything's on hold, but there are other things, and really trying to figure out what it is. I kind of know what it is for the next part of my life, and I don't really want it to look like the last few decades. I want it to be different, more for me, but how do I turn that into income? So
but before we get into that for a second, I mean, just go back since you and I, you've been more in the stock business than I have, because I've been out for a while. So since you mentioned it, right, in terms of like, first of all, I'm going to think that Shutterstock probably knew what was going on when they let you go. I imagine that, because that's the timing is just too close. But that being said, what do you think about this? I mean, Getty is like the flippin' vacuum cleaner, vacuuming up all stock agencies, and what, like, since you are the closest one to the inside to what was going on, without giving, I don't want you to give away any secrets or something like that you might have signed up for, but just like what your opinion is of this, because Getty has done this across the board, and like stock in general is just going, I don't know where it's going. So I don't know. What do you think about it?
Well, as you know, it was a healthy little industry that we had worked together in when we both were back in the late 80s and so forth at the Image Bank. And prior to that, I worked in publishing as like a researcher editor. So I would have to, nothing was digitized then. So there were so many stock agencies all over the city. And all over the country and in Europe. And if you really were doing a story on a specific subject, you would start making phone calls to these agencies to get images of what you were looking for. And if it was very specific, there were some very specific agencies. Let's say you needed very specific images of Eastern Europe and Russia at the time. Well, there was an agency that just dealt with images from Eastern Europe and Russia. So you call them and they would have put together either slide sheets and actual prints for you to go through, and you'd go down to their office, do the research, take what you need. And if you use any of them, you would inform them, and based upon the publication run and the size the image was used, that's how they charge. But as you know, back in the 90s, there was a little agency in London, I remember, that had an agent in Chicago called Click. And Click was the agent of this London agency called Tony Stone. And
sorry, I'm laughing.
Tony
Stone. Yeah.
And eventually Tony Stone bought Click in Chicago, and that was their first foothold in America. Then Stone started buying agencies. Then there was this guy out in the West Coast in Seattle, and I can't remember his first name at the moment. But his last name was Getty. And he thought, he who controls the media controls the world. At least
I've heard that before.
Yes. And that was part of his shtick. So
was it Mark Getty?
I think so. That sounds about right.
That sounds right. I don't know why. I could be wrong, but
they bought Stone, and which had owned a couple of smaller agencies, and they started purchasing other agencies because by then the digital age was coming. And I don't know if you remember when we were at the Image Bank. I think you were still there. They sent us to a place up in Maine to check out Photoshop One.
I was there when that happened, but I wasn't.
You didn't go?
No.
Well, it was pretty fascinating. And then, by then, at that time, I think Nikon had released a digital camera that was either a half or 1 megapixel. And that was like $20,000 or $40,000 at the time.
I remember that camera. Yeah.
And you had this hard drive that it attached to that you had to have a rolling cart behind it.
I know that.
It was just incredible. And then, Microsoft got involved through Corbis, and they started purchasing agencies as well. So they were for a long time, the two biggest competitors.
Well, and Kodak bought the Image Bank.
Right.
Of all places to buy, like flipping Kodak too.
Right. But, Kodak eventually unloaded it to Getty.
Yeah.
Because like everything else, unfortunately, Kodak touched.
Yes.
They didn't do anything with.
It turned yellow.
Right. Exactly. They had this guy there back in the 60s who developed the first digital chip. And Kodak said, "Nah, this is never."
Yeah, that whole story about that poor guy. He comes up with this camera, which looks like a Frankenstein kind of thing with a tape deck on it, and the guys at Kodak are just like, "Oh, we can't see this." And
right,
that was always my frustration. That was always my frustration with Kodak across the whole board with all this stuff. They just could not get their act together. I was just watching Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and there's a scene where Terry Garr and Richard Dreyfuss are in their house, and one of the kids grabs their instant camera and then the other kid slaps Richard Dreyfuss in the butt, and he turns around and they take a shot of him. But it was the Kodak instant camera that Kodak made to
rival
try to compete with Polaroid camera. I think this one you had two versions of it. I think one you had to actually crank by hand.
Yes. Yeah.
And there was another one that was more expensive that and they got sued into they got a lot of trouble from Polaroid. So
right.
Kodak never really could get their act together, which was so unfortunate.
It was always too late.
Yeah. Go back to Tony Stone for a second. Sorry. So everybody's listening, you got two old guys who have been in stock business for a while. This is where we come from. But anyway, Tony Stone was the catalog. Like every year, a stock agency would put out a catalog. So they would show their best images, or they thought they were the best images. And that was always sort of sent out to the clients or potential clients so that they could say, oh, this is what we got on hand. And Image Bank was always grabbing Tony Stone's catalog somehow. And we were always looking at it and saying, look at their photography. Look at the kind of stuff they were doing. Look at the kind of printing they were doing. They're printing in their catalog, I remember, biased towards a warmer tone, and all their pictures looked so much, I don't know, they always seem to have more life in them and stuff than even the Image Bank pictures. And even their layouts and stuff were nicer. So, yeah. So, Getty goes around and vacuum cleans up everything. And
all these agencies.
Right. And there's no more brands, right? Do they still have brands?
There's very little. There are some brands around, very small niche brands.
I know that,
Tetra
is still around.
Yeah, but Tetra, I forget who distributes them.
Well, they used to be distributed by a lot, but now they're owned. Now they're owned by Getty, aren't they?
I think so.
Yeah. So Tetra is a small stock agency, which I actually have stuff in there through. I haven't put stuff in there in a long time, and every now and then I get a check for like $60 or something.
I got a royalty from Getty the other day for 1 cent.
Really?
I
Wow.
actually got a bank transfer. Do you know how much money it probably was to generate all that paperwork for 1 cent? Well, anyway,
Yeah.
the stock industry wasn't that involved in it as much as you were. I did shoot for like Photonica, which was great, and I
Mhm.
did really well for quite a while until they got bought by Getty, and then it just slowly dwindled to nothing. They just did away with brands once they bought
Right.
another agency. Within a year or two, the brand was gone, and things just kind of got lost within the Getty library.
Do you think Getty is still going to keep the Shutterstock brand? Because I know Shutterstock shows up a lot in, like, especially with their videos and stuff like that. They show up in, like, the credits for movies and stuff like that a lot. So I'm just wondering if you think that will
Well,
be
the,
the
the new
case.
company is going to be called Getty something, but Shutterstock's name is not going to be on it.
Really?
And I,
Okay.
I and I think, from what I understand, within a year, I think the Shutterstock name will no longer be around. Maybe a little
Yeah.
bit longer, but it'll fully be integrated into Getty, and along with all the photographers, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, there'll be more layoffs to come
So
there.
actually, since you're here, I mean, I've talked about this with Ward a few times, and Ward was not in the stock business, but you are. So my prediction is they're just they're on life support. If Getty's buying Shutterstock and whatnot, they're just doing it because their days are numbered, because
Yes,
AI is going to just eat into stock photography, I think, first, because it's a lot easier to make, and then eventually stock video, because you're already seeing, like, the
you
quality
already
of AI
right,
videos.
right.
So what do you think? I mean, is it just they're, like, on life support, or
I think it's just a matter of time in a few years that
yeah?
that AI will take over. The whole ad campaign with Levi's, and that
No,
they
tell me
are
about it.
using AI generated models, and they were called out on this, and they said the reason why they're doing this is because they cannot find the diverse models they were looking for to model their jeans. And I'm thinking,
Sorry.
did,
Oh
did
my god,
they,
that makes me laugh.
right, haven't they stuck their head out the window? You know,
Right, you
so,
take the subway
so
in New York City. For crying out loud.
exactly. And
Oh, that's hysterical. Wow, I
I
didn't know
read
that.
this, and like, I almost like, spit my coffee across the room.
Yeah, yeah.
I just couldn't believe it. I think it for them, companies will find a way to keep more and more of whatever their profits are and spend less and less trying to make advertising. And if they could generate it via AI, all they really require, and I'm not saying this insultingly, is some kid sitting at a computer who enjoys doing this,
Mm-hmm.
is smart, somewhat well read,
Someone who
and
knows how
could,
to get the prompts and stuff, right?
right, who can,
Yeah.
figure out, well, we're looking for this, this, and this. Okay, I know just the word salad to put together to generate these kind of images,
Right.
and
Right.
you can keep going and
Yeah.
tweaking it. So
So
this
that's
kid's
yeah.
probably getting paid, maybe 50K a year, or maybe he's freelance. He's making
Yeah.
$25 an hour. Who
And I
knows?
imagine, like, a place like Getty will eventually do the same thing. Like,
Yes.
they're going to be producing. I mean, one of the things that one of the things that stock agencies used to do, and this is to our audience, is way back when they would often get into deals with photographers for, like, a short term production. So they would have a photographer maybe who shot sports really well, and they would give them a certain amount of money, and the photographer would produce a shoot for them, for whatever the money was. And sometimes they worked a deal with splitting the profits with the photographer. Sometimes the photographer just sold the pictures outright to them.
Right.
So we call those in-house productions, right? And it would happen in, I think, every agency. Guess what? A, I have to imagine those are never going to happen again. And
No.
B, I think that in-house productions are now going to be what you're talking about. Some young person sitting at, or a couple of young people sitting at a computer, messaging chat GBT or whatever their version of it is, and creating imagery and then sending it to a client. But then again, a client is going to be just doing that. And so why are they going to call up Getty when they've got their own 25-year-old person sitting at a computer,
Well, here's the thing. What I see, I see that clients using stock as a basis, or the basis for generating an image that they want. So they find, oh, okay, I need a Latino in a bank behind the counter speaking with a female Asian client that had come in. And they're going to take that as the basis for generating whatever new AI image they have in mind, whether, oh, well, show this woman holding up the teller, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So that's the big thing. I think they're going to probably selling maybe permissions. I don't know.
Oh,
But it's one of the things that Getty, I know, and Shutterstock are so against. I know that, I don't know what happened, but Getty had this huge lawsuit against a client of theirs that did one of these, what do they call it? Data deals. A company comes in, purchases thousands of images to use to teach an AI system what things are. Getty didn't want that because we don't know what the end result will be. And it's somewhat of a copyright infringement. So they end up suing this company, but I never heard what the outcome was. And I can't remember who the company was.
They probably bought them.
Probably. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm thinking, as I start to think about this, they just absorbed it. Said, well, we could, here's $100 million. We'll just buy you. Okay, that sounds great.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I know that Shutterstock has its own internal AI generator where if you're a client, you purchase an image and you want to change it somehow. So they have an AI generator in-house that you could use to alter that image how you want it. But it's only for your own usage. The client can't sell the end result, and it's
right as a new picture.
It's still property of Shutterstock, but that client can still use that image for whatever it is they require.
So that almost sounds like having an in-house Photoshop retoucher, say like, oh, right. I want to change that airplane to a, I don't know, to a bird or something like that. It's the perfect shot, but I want a bird instead of an airplane. And
right.
The AI will do that, and client can then use it for their ad or something like that.
But what's sad? I think this industry, what was great is that it was a great way, if you were really involved and paid attention, to make you could make a decent living for a while. And then once digital came around, and then Getty, I remember changing the contract and royalty free. The Getty changed the nature of the contracts around the change of the millennium and that's when digital really started somewhat taking off. And that really changed the whole industry. One these days can make a decent living anymore. It may be a supplement.
I don't know. I mean, I think for me, I would think the amount of effort that you have to put into it is this just doesn't pay off. Changing subject slightly, but still on stock. You've heard of Unsplash, right?
Yes.
What do you think? You think of that? I've never asked you about that, but to me, it's lunacy that photographers would do this. But I haven't really looked at it lately. I don't know if you had an opinion about it.
You mean the free image sites?
Yes, the free image sites. They're probably not the only one, right?
Right. There's Pexels, which is really popular.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I don't understand. Yeah, Pexels. I don't understand what that is, because one of the things that we were dealing a lot with at Shutterstock was that people would download images off of Pexels, off
Mm-hmm.
of Unsplash, from Almy, and then upload it to Shutterstock as their own. But the thing is,
Really?
there was always a tell within the images, and I'll tell you privately, because I don't want to give it away.
We'll do that offline.
We'll do that offline. And it's a very obvious tell that you knew that these images were not owned by a specific person. And also,
go ahead.
There are people in various parts of the world that do not have, and I'm not saying this insultingly, do not have the reasonable means of income to travel to various exotic parts of the world. And that was also another tell, like something's not right here.
Okay, yeah.
This person is from, I don't mean this to be derogatory.
Well, I'll just say like X country where it's,
the standard of living is maybe $100 a year.
Right.
Now, how did this person do travel throughout Europe?
Right. Like, how did they hire models and put them in, Fiji Islands and stuff like that, and get
how
releases
did they get
on
to
everything?
Stay at this hotel? I couldn't stay at this hotel.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
the Unsplash, like whenever I get a chance to use free pictures from Unsplash, I do it. And it's just basically to say, you're going to give your pictures away? Fine. I'm going to use them. And I use them for presentations and putting in like booklets that I make for giving out to students or something like that. Cause it's easier to do that than to try to create a picture. And I try, unless I can't find a picture, then I might fire up one on AI because I'm just illustrating something. But like some people, I get class. This is really hard because when I get students coming into my classes and some of them are trying to like get careers in photography, and I really don't want to be down on them. I want to be like, well, geez, I don't know what you can do. Like, every little bit of, unless you want to be a wedding photographer or a sports photographer, or a news photographer, things that you can't really make up with AI. Like, I don't know what's left.
Oh, you can.
For them to do.
We're getting a lot of news imagery in, let's say, on the whole Gaza conflict at Shutterstock.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
And it was like unbelievable. And it was like, you're looking at it, and after a while, you could see that it was fake because the person's running and they have 6 fingers, or like 6 fingers on one hand and 4 on the other, and
yeah. Well, but you know what I mean? It's like, I mean, in terms of a career,
I don't know.
Stock used to be something that was a good sort of in between, like doing assignments and like being on your own. Like you could sort of mix and match. And if you got a foothold in a stock agency, like you said before, you could make some decent money, or money on the side, I would say, too. Like if you weren't doing stock 100%, if you were devoting some time to it, monthly, you might get a check that might pay your rent, or, it would be like a useful thing.
Right.
But now I look at these students who come in and they're like
they all have high
guys.
Well, I've done like portfolio reviews at ICP. I've done it 2-3 times. And I asked the students, show me their work. Like, what do you want to do? Everyone wants to be a famous photojournalist or fashion photographer or whatever. I said, so what are you going to do to get there? How are you going to get there? What is going to fuel you? Keep you put a roof over your head and food on the table. And they all just sit there blankly and they don't know.
Yeah.
And at the time, this was still a few years ago, I'd say, you should look at, don't discount stock photography, it's just not, don't throw all your eggs in that one basket, but
Right.
have it be part of what you do, part of the road that you're on to get where you want to be. And, I'm not going to say you shouldn't be a barista for a while, or a waiter or waitress, whatever, it's valid, or, work in the studio as an assistant or whatever. Those jobs are out there, or, doing real estate photography, something to support yourself to get where you want to be, while still doing the work you want to do. I mean, that's what I always saw stock as, I didn't want to be a commercial photographer. So I just used being a photo editor as a way to support myself while just doing the work I wanted to do, for myself.
Well, that's a nice segue into doing the work that you've been doing. So I like that. That was a perfect segue, actually. So I haven't seen you since, I'm sure I've talked to you, but like, I haven't talked to you about this. You've got 2 books that are out now.
Well, one is out, one's on its way.
One's going to come out in April, but let's talk about the one that's been out for a year now. Tell us about it. What's the name of it and what's going on?
It's called Manhatta, and though it's loosely inspired by the 2021 film by Charles Sheeler and Paul Strand, they did a film of Manhattan. They called it Manhatta after the Native American name for the island. And it's considered the first fully art film. It's only like 10 or 12 minutes long. And you can find it on YouTube pretty easily. There are there are various versions, and it's not narrated, but it has a poem by Walt Whitman overlaid on it, and there's orchestral music from the time. So it's interesting. But, it really was inspired by working for a company that was based in the Empire State Building. And since I have a young son and my wife would drop him off at daycare at the time, and I went in early so I could leave early to pick him up, I'd be in the office by myself for sometimes 2 or 3 hours. And was high enough up that, I'd see the sunrise, and it was just one day, it's just like the sun just like hit me in the face, and I just really was again looking out the window, and that just like sparked this whole thing of shooting these cityscapes from high up. It's something I think I've always thought about, but never had the opportunity. But here I was working there for a few years before, like, all of a sudden, it just like literally smacked me in the eye.
Yeah. So what's going on is you're sitting there for a couple of years, and it's storing itself up in your head, right? You're starting to get until one day it's like,
exactly.
It's like, oh, but had you already seen Manhatta before? Like, you already know about that?
Yes, I did. I actually saw it. I might have seen it when I was a student at SVA.
I was about to ask you that, because it now that you're mentioning it, of course I read, I know that the book is based on this film, but as you're describing it now, like, I haven't looked for it yet, but if you're describing it now, it's like, I think I must have seen this at SVA. We both went to SVA different times, but it just feels like something that I would have seen in my, like, history of film class or something like that.
Exactly. They do. They always show that. I mean, though, like, I shot parts of Manhattan in black and white, I really kind of wanted it. I just didn't want to emulate the film.
Right.
So I began shooting it, leaving it alone in color. I wanted to kind of make it my own, so to speak. And it just kind of went on. And I did shoot it for quite a number of years before I thought, oh, I have enough here. Maybe I should do a book. It was when I would post images on Instagram or Facebook, it would get, really good responses. So I thought, well, maybe I do have something here. But that wasn't the motivator. The motivator was just
Right.
me
It's
by
doing
myself,
it. Yeah.
walking around the floor in the morning,
Yeah.
windows on all four
Actually,
sides.
I wanted to ask you this: are all of them shot from? They can't all. They're not all shot from the Empire.
99.9% of them are shot from Empire State Building. There
Really?
are like a handful.
There's like that are further downtown, right?
Yeah, there are a couple. There are some I once shot from my wife's office at the time. She was on
Okay.
Fifth
Yeah.
Avenue uptown. And then there's some actually kind of shot from below. But I had done a series like almost a decade earlier that kind of led into this. I was shooting like the tops of buildings. I was really intrigued by the ornate metalwork on the tops of the old buildings in Manhattan. So that was like kind of like a prelude to Manhatta. Who knows? Maybe the next thing I'll somehow get involved in going up above Manhattan in a balloon, and shooting down. But
Yeah.
I mean, the work. I've been a street photographer, so kind of fueled the.
Yeah, it's so unlike your other stuff. I mean, if anybody knows Keith, your work on the street is like, very inspiring. I follow you on Instagram. I've been seeing your street stuff for a long time. I really love it. You're right in everybody's face too. The kind of like New York photographer. And this is so unlike you, but like that doesn't mean that it. We all, like you said, Walt Whitman, right? He said we all contain multitudes or something like that. I'm paraphrasing him, right? We're multitudes, right? So yeah, and again, it's urban, right? You grew up in, you're a New Yorker, and it's certainly part of your visual literacy, like what you've seen every day and stuff like that. But it is so different, it's not even like portraits of buildings. It's, you've got these, it's like so abstract sometimes,
well, I find it very much. Yeah, I find it. Well, at least for me, I try and photograph every day and have been for a long, long time. And like you catch on, all of a sudden you start noticing something in your imagery, and you start maybe paying a little bit more attention, and that develops into. I don't want to say a project or a series, but it develops into something. And then you're doing that for a while, and then something else kind of begins to show within that, and you start noticing that, and you kind of follow down that path for a while, and so on and so forth. So for me, the street work kind of developed into this building stuff, and then the building stuff kind of goes back into the street work. Like recently, I had a show. I was offered a show in France, and it's something I thought about always wanting to do, is showing my street work and the building work together, like above and below.
Yeah.
And I had actually thought about that some years ago when I was doing these. I was working with a panoramic camera, and I would take pictures at street level or at the ground and then shoot what was up above. And I thought it'd be interesting to pair the two, like above and below.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It kind of never came into fruition, but it's always, I did a few, and they're probably in storage somewhere, but it's always been in my head. So they came up with this idea. Well, we want to show you buildings and your street work kind of mixed together. And it just made so much sense. And they did a great job in curating the work and kind of mixing.
Is the show still up?
It will be up through next month.
Oh, and where
So
is
it's
it?
up. It's in Briey, France, which is
Oh.
just outside of Metz, near the
Mm-hmm.
Luxembourg German border.
How did they how did they find you?
Well, it's funny. I went to graduate school with a guy who he was a painter, and he ended up somehow in France along with an architect that we went to school with, and they wanted to open up a school in Briey. There are these four Le Corbusier buildings. There's one in Berlin, and it's actually three in France. One's in Briey, one's in Marseille, and there's another one somewhere I can't remember, in somewhere in the west of France.
Mm-hmm.
And Le Corbusier had this vision to having these self-contained communities in these buildings where people live and work and they go to school. So there's a school, there may be shops on the ground floor, and then there are apartments above where
Hmm.
people in this community live. And the building was kind of abandoned for a while, and then they had gotten some government grants and it was refurbished, and they were started this school, but they had a falling out, some difficulty, and the architect moved to Australia to teach. But my friend is still there operating. He has a design company, and there's this gallery within the building, and the
Oh,
community comes. So I hadn't
that's
heard
really
from
cool.
him for like years, and I had no idea who was following me. And he said, would I be interested in a show? And I said, sure. So they took care of the whole thing.
Were you able to go out there or no?
Yes, we went there
Oh, really?
actually. Yeah, we went there. It was beginning of October.
Mm-hmm.
We went there, stayed for 3 days in Paris. Then we took the bus to Metz, where we met them, and they picked us up and took us on to Briey. And we were there for like 3 days and came back and spent another day in Paris and came home.
Nice.
It was really
So
nice.
you were there for the opening, I guess. Yeah.
Yes, and actually,
Wow.
I had
Yeah.
no idea that my friend's assistant, his father was mayor of Briey. So he never, so the mayor was there. He intro-
Wow.
introduced me in French, and they had an
That's
interpreter. But it was
wow.
such a nice little. It was 2 floors, the show, and over 50 prints, and the community there is really, very open, very arts minded, and people were very receptive. And it was like no, like your typical arty farty opening attendees there.
No, yeah, it sounds very, I don't know. I was going to say small towny or something like that, but
In a sense, it was,
yeah.
but he sent me some clippings. I don't know if it got reviewed, but it was listed in French papers. It's a show. So
It's nice. You have now that
yeah.
you know the international thing. I guess it's interesting to me that this place in France would be showing your work in New York, like your stuff
New
of New
York.
York. I mean, yeah. I mean, not that like
Well,
we're international, of course, but it's like it seems, I don't know, somehow it seems so specific, but
well,
it's
it's
encouraging too. Yeah.
it is, because I think that even though what we do here, in some sense, in some ways, is not that much different than like maybe some street photographer in Paris, but everyone has their own sensibility. So it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting, my sensibility, or anyone from here, from America, going over there would be of interest to that community.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So this had pictures from your street, but also the stuff from Manhatta, or was it different
yes,
stuff? Yeah.
no, it was both. And so here's the thing: I'm very much, don't stop posting. You just never know what happens or what
Mm.
can happen from posting on Facebook, or, even though as much as I dislike Instagram still, or X,
Mm-hmm.
oh, well, No, I don't post much on X, but I do on Instagram. And Instagram is, it's not my favorite, but I've met some good people through Instagram.
Really?
And
All right, that's encouraging.
you just never know what can happen from just posting online, you know.
Yeah, I guess I'm so well. I lost my Instagram account, my
I
original one, a
remember.
bunch of years ago, and it took a year and a half off because I was trying to also get them to reinstate it, and of course that's just like you might as well be spitting in the wind, you know.
Yeah, it's
Uh, yeah, so I started up another account just because why not? I just haven't submitted. I haven't put that much stuff on there. Although I'll drop a picture now and then, and maybe I'll ramp that up again. But yeah, in my classes, I actually I diss Instagram a lot in my classes, but I do it in the sense of like trying to tell the students like you're Instagram is not the place, the bastion of good photography. I mean, you'll find good photographs there,
you
but
have to
don't
look really.
don't
Yeah,
yeah, but it's also uncurated. And it's like I say, look, if you find a photographer's work that you like, bookmark it and go to the photographer's website, and engage them directly. Don't but that being said, my angle towards Instagram is because they sort of represent social media in general. Because to me, like I'm trying to get people when I'm
you
teaching
did
them to, well, I'm trying to get them to go back to looking at pictures the way they're supposed to be in books,
right. Yeah,
and in prints and stuff like that. And that's what I would like. I mean, maybe it's a, you know, what's the word? I'm chasing windmills here or something like that, in some sense. But like with your pictures now in a book that's already out and an upcoming book, that's kind of how I think, or let's kind of I think the imagery should be seen, and because you're presenting it in such a way in an order and size and look and stuff like that. And so, yeah, there's a place for Instagram or Facebook, and like I said, for the photographer, because that's how people are going to see your stuff. But the final presentation, for you is the book, and then even now the way this show was given to you as well.
well, I sometimes think there is a specific kind of, I'll be scrolling on Instagram and a picture comes up and I said, oh, I bet this got, a ton of likes. And I look, and it's like, 100,000, a million likes. And there's a certain kind of picture that the Instagram community loves. It's going to be this silhouette of a person in a landscape. It's kind of moody, and you know it when you see it. And then you look at the number of likes, and it was interesting. Something had come up on, what is it, Threads, the
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Instagram alternate. And there's a very famous photographer who posted under this guy's work. He posted, he was a black and white photographer from Germany. He said, I just wanted to introduce myself. And this very well known photographer posted, you just had a post here just to get people to like your work, because the guy got hundreds of thousands of likes. And I began looking at the guy's work, and I think it's strangely, I'm getting a feeling it's AI. That there were two pictures that are almost similar. Like there's a figure in the image that is exactly the same,
Mm-hmm.
but the background is the same, but the weather isn't. One's snowy,
Mm.
one's rainy. And I'm looking at the shadows for change, and the shadows don't match the light in a sense. So I think either they're composited or something, but something just doesn't seem right. But,
Well, yeah.
I don't, who knows?
Yeah, to go back to your books for a second. Let's go back to
Yeah.
Manhatta. How long did it take you to put together and I know you've had there was trials and tribulations in this whole process, but finally, like, you've got a layout and a book. So that took
Right.
a long
I had
time.
I had God, 3 years. I had a friend I went to school with, and I always liked his design work. And I asked him if he would design the book, because I've kind of found a publisher. And he said, sure. And we went back and forth over like 5 months, 4 or 5 months. I let him pick the images and sequence it and come up with a design that I really liked. I got another friend who is a photographer who's out in Cleveland. He writes a lot, and he wrote the introduction, and I wrote a little something, and I got the first book, and I was like you, when you received it, I was really disappointed. The cover was fine, but everything else inside was like, it's like they turned the light on when it was being printed.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Like nothing was like had the saturation and the depth that the images had. So we had gone back and forth with them. And then I find out that their process is that they do print on demand, and they use an inkjet printer to print these images, whatever it was. So they tried to correct it, and kind of we came out kind of halfway. It was either one extreme or another, and nothing.
Too light or too dark?
You're right. Maybe? So it was kind of in the middle, and it's still somewhat disappointing. So I don't know.
You need to find some place to. I mean,
it has to be offset printed. You know,
and it's got to be in your budget. I mean, this might not be practical, but I can give you the information. We had one of our listeners, a guy named Jeffrey Saldinger. I met up with him. He actually sent Ward and I his book that he did where he lives in Astoria. And the book printing is incredibly good. And the place was in Jersey City. Now, I don't know how practical it is or expensive it is, but I can give you the information. But the printing of his book was fantastic, and it's black and white and stuff like that. And so, but it sounds like he went through a lot of iterations with them, and he was very particular about it. So, but yeah, finding a good printer is going to be one of those things. But you're learning, like you're going through this whole process, and you're learning, what to do, what not to do. It looks like when you said that you got a designer and someone to write, it seems like such a good thing, because you're getting people who are outside of your own brain who are helping you with stuff. And it seems like a very valuable thing that you got. And I remember you sent us the PDF of the layout, and the book was like, I need to have this. And it's got to look like the PDF though. So I imagine that's very frustrating when you get your book, your first print back, and it's like, it doesn't look anything like what you thought it would be. But the pictures themselves, like the way they're sequenced, it is like the book itself. When you get the right printer, it's a work of art itself. Like that whole thing is incredible. And I live in New York. I've lived in New York all my life, and like you're just giving me a vision of New York that I haven't really seen, which is kind of cool, because I always want to see New York. I envy people who are coming to New York for the first time, and they're like, they see things for the first time. Right? I can't see New York like that. Except now I'm looking at your book, and I'm like, I'm seeing parts of New York for the first time. So it's I really enjoy that.
I was offered, a reprint of the book by someone, but I can't afford it. I thought, do you really want to print it and distribute it, whatever? But no, they just wanted my money, and I
oh, no.
I know they would have done a good job, but I don't have that kind of money.
So what kind of advice? What kind of advice would you give for doing a book, like from what you've learned so far?
I think I had the wrong kind of publisher choose me, and I think I should have really dug deeper into what they did and what they're really best at, which was just words on paper and illustrations, not photographs. And that was a mistake that was made. Now, with this other book coming out,
tell us about that.
This publisher is in London, and I get an email one day and ask me if I'd be interested in doing. They are very well known in doing books on history, militaria, travel
Mm-hmm.
books, all kinds of those kind of books. And you've
Mm-hmm.
seen them in Barnes and Noble. They're always
Mm-hmm.
like on one of the first
Yeah. Yeah.
displays
Yeah.
when you come in, and they're all like together. Well, they wanted to try something different and do a set. They call them travel books, but they're not travel books. They want to do a series of books of destinations done by street photographers. I don't know who else they're going to be using. And I said, "Well, how did you find me?" And they just said, "Well, the internet." They just
Yeah, they just
Googled and they found me, and they
oh,
saw my
that's good.
work, and they
Yeah.
asked me. So the first book that's coming out is called Boroughs. It's kind of a walk around book of the boroughs of Manhattan
Hmm.
without Staten Island, because I can't get out there.
Yeah.
I told them I
Sorry.
can't get out there readily, and not that
Yeah.
I really want to, but
So-
I did Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, as much as I could. It's
Yeah.
probably more heavily New York, Manhattan Island than
Mhm.
the others. But then, while doing all this, they asked me if I'd be interested in doing others and if I had some ideas. So in the midst of finishing one now on Broadway from
Oh. Yeah.
Battery Park to Inwood. So I'm just going through the tedious job of captioning everything. And I am,
Yeah.
I am my own worst editor. I know they'll come back and remove some things, which I'm fine about. Whatever
Mhm.
they do, they do. Because I know they changed some captions when I saw the proof of the Burroughs book. So I'm pretty okay. So I want to get this book finished, get that out before I start jury duty on Thursday.
Oh.
And then
Yeah.
the third book they asked me to do is the Chinatowns of New
Oh.
York. So Flushing, it's Sunnyside, and then downtown Manhattan, Chinatown here.
Oh.
So
Okay. So there's going to be 2 more in the pipeline.
yes,
Nice. Oh, I didn't know that. That's really cool.
yeah.
Fab.
So no one's breaking down my door to do books except for this company, and I'm quite happy. It's an opportunity, and like, who knows where it'll lead.
Yeah, it's a
I
nice
don't.
series to have too. It's like you get the
Yeah.
Time Life photography books, but it's
And this is like, I know a real publisher. They do decent reproductions. I
yeah.
think all their reproductions are on glossy, semi-glossy paper. They're paperbacks, and they don't sell for very much, which is in another way somewhat attractive, I find, because I can remember. Do you remember Lustrum Press? Like
Wait.
Ralph Gibson had his own.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
he, besides his own books, he printed some books for some other people, and they were like these, 8.5 by 11 books, and they were soft covered, and they were very thin, and the reproductions were pretty decent. They're all
Hmm.
black and white imagery, and I have that whole series somewhere. So it's kind of like along that line. They didn't sell for very much at the time, so it's accessible. Manhatta, unfortunately, I kind of see as, I want a hardcover coffee table book,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
should be printed really richly, like
Well,
what's his name on Seinfeld should have the little coffee table legs coming out of.
This is a coffee table book. Kramer's
Yes.
coffee table book on coffee
Right,
tables.
exactly.
I'm sure that you'll be able to figure that out at some point. I mean, I know it's a big to do, but you've got the material. You're already like 2/3 the way, and
Right.
you do need to find a printer that does justice to your photographs. I mean, right now the PDF version of it is just fantastic. I mean, because it's the pictures and the way it's laid out, but of course it's PDF. I don't mind
Right.
PDF, but like there's nothing like a book,
Right.
that
Yeah.
sits on the shelf and
But the book
talks
doesn't
to you.
look anything. The book doesn't look anything like the PDF,
Yeah.
unfortunately, which is
Yeah.
so disappointing.
Well, like I said, you got 2/3 of the thing. You got the hard work done. Now you just need to find
Right.
when you can find a printer that you like afford and figure out what to do and stuff like that. But it does. I didn't know you were doing these 2 other books, so that's great. Any other books that you'd want to do on your own besides Manhatta? I mean, did you think you would want to do something on your street photography?
Yeah, I would. I would love to see. I guess would be. I don't see that coming for. I hope I'm around for a couple more decades. But a real like very highly edited and well printed book of my street photography.
Yeah.
I guess eventually I could save that towards when I'm not going to really feel like maybe photographing as much anymore.
Okay.
Now that keeps me going,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Did you see that film on Saw Lighter?
I'm embarrassed to say I have not, and I've got to see it. What's it called? Shoot, I just forgot it.
No,
I know
remember.
Yeah, I know.
It was a lot. It was a lot of fun. He was a
it's
real
not that long
character.
ago, right? It wasn't that long ago.
It was within the last 5 years, I think.
Yeah, I'll have to look. I'm gonna look it up.
But he was a real character, and it's just like I was listening to something Joel Meyerowitz said recently. I had no idea how he like archived his imagery. Like from day one, he started
Meyerowitz or Lighter?
No, Joel Meyerowitz. He started a card catalog of his prints, so he knew where to find certain things and had keyworded descriptions for every image. So
wow.
Now this is all digitized. So this analog card catalog and this whatever he's using to digitize and catalog his imagery are there. And he says he's been having a lot of fun lately by punching in like window, red, blue, and then seeing what images come up out of his archive. And he says he's seen things that he hasn't seen for years, and I'm thinking, who has the time to do I don't know about Joel's background, but it takes a lot of time, takes a lot of must imagine money, to hire someone, or I don't see him sitting there doing this,
with a system and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what his background is as far, family, whether he comes from money or whatever, but I know that he was in advertising and just quit his job and became street photographer.
That I remember. Yeah. Why'd you bring up the Saw Lighter thing?
Well, just because in contrast, they asked Saul to show him some imagery. He picked up a cup of coffee, picked up a bunch of papers, and pulled out a couple of like yellow Kodak slide boxes, and then had a little table with a little light box on it, and pulled out slides and like laying out gems.
So he's the other extreme, right? Yeah.
Right. He's in this studio that's like, looks like wild lions ran through it, tore through, or bears and tore through the place. But he knew, well, okay, there's some images I know. So he picks up his coffee, gets all this crap out of the way, pulls out a slide box.
I kind of like that, but he ends up with the same kind of thing, whereas Meyerowitz is typing in, red door or something or other. But Lighter he could just pull out a box and he gets a random picture anyway.
Right. He has no keywording, no nothing. He's like every other photographer I think I know. We just store our stuff in boxes, or if it's digitized, it's in folders. Oh, images of New York, images of Mexico. Maybe it goes down further. Oh, this is like China. Maybe. This is Chinatown. Yeah. This is, another Hell's Kitchen or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's as far as it goes. And I don't know, anyone that keywords unless it's going up on Instagram where
You know what I'm holding out for? I mean, like, I looked at my Lightroom library just the other day. I don't fire it up that much, but just when I'm like dumping my cards into my archive. But I'm at 1.1 million files. My Lightroom, which is really push. I mean, I keep hearing I'm pushing the limits of Lightroom's library, thing, because I don't break them up into different libraries. And it's not all like, a 1.1 million pictures. Yeah, they're not all good pictures. They're just the files.
right,
But I
right.
store everything. And I'm not getting paid enough to go and delete. I mean, I'm not getting paid at all to go and delete pictures, right? So I tend to keep everything. And two, like keywording. I laugh at keywording, but I'm holding out until it's got to be coming around the corner where there's going to be an AI keywording. I know there's one app I already downloaded. I don't even use it because it's kind of wonky. But like when Lightroom finally gets like an AI keywording thing where I can just let the library run overnight or a week or whatever, and
Right.
let it
Oh, Jesus.
do like basic keywords to like 1.1 million pictures. I am not touching keywords.
Yeah, that might be a few months.
I just let it run and let it run and let it run, but I don't know to what end. Like, but maybe to do something that Meyerowitz is doing is like plugging in, what pictures do I have? Like, where are they? What random thing can I pull out of my archive or something like that? I mean, I like the idea of that. So, but anyway, that's is your system any better or worse or what?
No, I kind of throw everything into. I heard that.
You heard that?
The cat.
It's my cat Ed. He's an old guy. But yeah, go ahead.
When I have a hard drive that I dump everything onto, by virtue of what camera I use, that's all, And then I have another hard drive where everything that I've processed that's finished, I want to keep, goes into either like I'll have a folder of Manhatta, and I make sure I keep the file name, the file number, because that's how I'll find that image later on. And sometimes that works. Sometimes I've really got to scroll through everything. And then, some things I have titles on and some things I don't. I just still keep the camera file number. And that's what I use. That's all. But, I have like a file, Hell's Kitchen, Herald Square. I've broken down New York into the older neighborhoods, like the Tenderloin.
Oh, yeah.
Things like that. Just because it makes it easier to find things I'm looking for. So
yeah. Let me ask you one more question before we wrap up, just because you mentioned this before. Do you still use your wide lux? Do you still have it?
I sold it.
You did sell it. Oh,
I haven't used it. I haven't used it in a long, long time, and I have a bunch of older panoramic cameras that I really enjoyed using, and I have an X-Pan, and I haven't used that. Yeah, I haven't used that in a while.
But that's a different kind of panoramic camera.
Yeah. Right? And I have a very early Kodak Panoram from the turn of this last century.
Oh.
And I actually have two of them because I was afraid the one I had, I'd already slipped on the ice once at the end of the block I had lived on, and I fell on it. And luckily, the way it was constructed, it was all dovetail joints, all the corners. So it was luckily nothing cracked, but the camera just came apart. So it came apart by those joints, and I was able to put it back together and glue it, and it worked like it did.
Oh my gosh! The good old days when you could fall on your camera and just glue it back together, right?
Exactly. So I was worried, and I found another one. I think it was on eBay, and I bought it and just put it away. They weren't that expensive then.
Yeah.
Now I don't even know what they're worth.
Well, but that wide lux, you lent it to me once, and I had a lot of fun with it. It was such a weird experience. I mean, now you do that with your phone, but the way that it was just the lens that spun around, right?
Right.
And then
It
yeah.
was supposedly invented to mimic human vision with periphery,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Except it distorted everything, but that's because
because if you tilted it, it would just swipe it. And if you use that at slow shutter speed and you move the camera while it was scanning, it would create this wavy
thing. Yeah. Did you do that? Did you ever do that?
I did. But when I was using it, there was a photographer, became well known. Remember Michael Spano?
Oh yeah.
He made a name for himself doing street photography with the wide lux, and that's what I was doing at the time. Except he was well known. He was
the rest of us just
quite a few steps ahead of where I was at the time.
Yeah.
And I actually worked at a gallery where we had his first show of that street work. And I remember sitting there one Saturday. I was by myself, and Robert Frank came in and was looking at the work and kind of moved around the room. It was these two rooms. And then I think he asked me a question. I can't remember, and then just walked out. He wasn't there very long. He just kind of moved through the room and just left.
Took it in and then it's like, okay, you got to go.
Exactly. He didn't say really anything about it, whether he liked it or not. And I wasn't going to ask him.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that was a fun little camera. I always thought like part of me would want to pick one up again, but it just,
I think you could still find them. I think there was,
but it would sit on the shelf. I think, like,
I mean,
put Polaroid film. I mean, will I put a roll of film through it? I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah. I don't know. Mine was just sitting in a suitcase that I used to keep my cameras in. It was up on top of a cabinet, and I bring it out every now and then just to work the shutter and all that. And this guy gave me a little bit more than what I paid for it. Paid for it outright. He asked me about it, so
all right.
I said sure. I mean, I have so many cameras. I
know. That's good.
Half frame cameras for a while. And
we should get our unusual guys together and girl and like have like a round table of all the cameras that we've got and and see what we've got together. That would be really interesting. I don't ever sell my cameras. I've still got.
I have. I actually sold off all my Canon gear. I was basically using that, to shoot. I sometimes shoot corporate events. Just it's good money.
Yeah.
And I can't carry it for a whole evening anymore. It's just huge.
Yeah, and, there's not enough Advil in the world to get me.
Exactly. Exactly. Or they don't make people short enough that you can just, hold it up to eye level for you.
Yeah. Oh boy. Okay. Well, hey, look, we've gone a little while. I could go on for another hour with you because we haven't caught up. But let's give everybody a break for. Hey, so
I'm glad we're not drinking while we're doing this.
Yeah, I know. Who needs drinking, right? You just need age and gray hair, and you need to drink, right? So tell everybody where they're going to find you in the world.
Well, I have a blog I post to daily. It's just called keithgoldstein.me, and it's WordPress. So I'm on there. I'm on Instagram as KeithBG, and the books can be found on Amazon, and
I'll put links in the show notes.
Elsewhere as well, wherever better books are sold. If you Googled any of the titles, find
come up with it. All right.
A bookseller somewhere. Right. And Manhatta, if you go to outskirts.com, OUTSKIRTS, who's the publisher, If you purchase Manhatta from there, you get something of a discount.
Okay. All right.
So-
I'll put the links. I'll make sure to get the links in the show notes. But cool. And where can I be found? Oh, I'm Blue Sky now. AM Rosario. Instagram is AM Rosario Photo. My website is amrosario.com. What else? Oh, I'm a lot on Facebook now too, as you know, Keith. Facebook.com/Rosario Photo. And I've been getting a lot of subscribers. You guys who are listening are subscribing to the Substack newsletter. So why don't you subscribe to streetshots.substack.com and tell your family and friends about us, because I'm enjoying publishing, little newsletters from Substack. And I'm sure when Ward gets back, he's probably going to write up about his experiences at Daytona. I'll get him to write that up. We'll make a homework assignment.
Is he at the racetrack, may I ask?
He was in the pits too. So he's on his way back now. So he's literally probably flying in the air as we're speaking on this Monday. Yeah, it'll be cool. His pictures are really cool so far. So, and if you want to support the show, a great way to do it is to buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Antonio Rosario. So Mr. Goldstein, Keith, thanks for filling in for Ward, and we'll get the three of us together or more of us together.
I would love that.
We need to do a round table kind of thing. We got a
that'd be
bunch
great.
of guys talking photographs. So anyway, thanks for joining me, and have a good night. And everybody will see you in a couple of weeks. Probably Ward with his stories of racing. So get ready for that. And thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you.